Welcome back, Nuggets. This mother clucker's got some thoughts. Let's ruffle some feathers and get into the video. And if you would like to support my baby tick of a channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hype this video. And go check out my other videos while you're here. Okay, Nuggets, let's address the chicken in the coop for a moment. So this is all of the talk of Girl World at the moment. And instead of my video list getting smaller, it seems to be growing by the day, and it's a little weird to be doing this kind of video for Amberlynn when this is exactly the kind of video that I've been doing about Eugenia and TikTok, where instead today we're going to talk about Amberlynn and YouTube. And I do apologize, my boys in the background, they're doing a bit of a crow party, and they just want to be part of this video desperately and say hello. Okay, so I covered this a little bit in my live stream, and at the time I felt like there wasn't enough information to be able to put it into a video because I could only speculate on what was going on, but I do feel like I have a much better handle of what's going on now. So what's happening? Amber over the last week and a half has been having so many videos taken down, losing millions of views, and you can see that she has actually been demonetized as of, by the looks of things, the 16th of November. Now, this is quite interesting timing because it actually happens to be a week after all of those thousands of exhibits came through in the lawsuit that I've been discussing with Eugenia and TikTok. Now, if you have any questions or if you're not sure about this particular lawsuit, I do encourage you to go watch I've done 3 Eugenia videos, although the first one is probably the most pertinent to the case, where I go and actually break down what's happening. It is specifically from a TikTok / Eugenia kind of point of view because that's what originally got me into this case, but it does go through and answer all the questions. If you're confused about anything, I do encourage that you go look at that video. I'm not going to reiterate everything in this because I don't believe that this situation with Amber is wholly about the lawsuit, and I'm going to explain what I mean. I'm also planning, because if you have been watching my Eugenia content, you know that there was a 235-page document released that had 171 pages redacted. And my Nuggets, it's come out with a lot less redacted sections. It's a lot more appropriate now. So the judge has clearly looked at it and gone, let's put this out there. So what I'm planning on doing with this, because I found myself like right in the middle of reporting on this case and you know, here we are, I'm going to do a video on each of the 4 companies that are involved as defendants in this case, because they all have their own little shady acts, shall we say, that I think will be really fun to deep dive into. So what I want to touch on today is a little bit of that case, but also a little bit of what else is going on in the world, how this is affecting Amber. Let's deep dive into what's actually happening here. Now, one very interesting little tidbit that I wanted to raise, because I know that there are some other people in the girl world space that are being affected, but interestingly, Candy doesn't seem to be one of them. Candy being Hungry Fat Chick. Now, if you're not familiar with Candy, she pretty much exclusively uploads mukbang content and makes no show of hiding that. So you would think that in this, she would also be hit badly, but she isn't. And you can see on this Social Blade clip, there have been a couple of videos removed, but it's not on mass scale. It could be her removing them. Like, this sort of thing makes sense. Even if you look at mine, you can see as I play around with videos, as I make sure that they're not being age restricted and that they're appropriate for YouTube, you'll see mine go up and down as well. So there could be a range of reasons why this is happening to Candy. But I went and pulled all of Amber's deleted videos that have been deleted over the last week and a half. Even though these numbers here only total 45, there's actually been a total of 60. So I'm guessing the Social Blade reporting just hasn't caught up to that yet. So there are still actively videos being taken down. And I'm just going to let them roll on the screen as I'm talking about this. But you can see that they all, for the most part, have something in common. And that is speaking about her particular condition or lifestyle in a certain light. Now, because these videos have been removed, I have gone through the Wayback Machine and tried to find them, but it's having some server errors at the moment, so I can't access those to see if she did say anything inappropriate. But some of these, just based off the title alone, you can see absolutely break terms of service. So I've been hearing a little bit of talk about that this is new. YouTube's introduced all of these terms of service changes and all of this is now happening, and absolutely not. I am here to say this is verified information. This is not a new policy change. This policy change actually happened in 2023. And if you remember at that time in Girl World, there were a whole bunch of videos being age restricted at that time based on certain words being used. And this is provably true from personal experience because I've been battling with age restriction in YouTube since May, when I started really talking about those sorts of subjects. And I can tell you that the age restriction is so sensitive that you can't even use the first letters of the words to describe them in certain orders. So that's why I just reference things as conditions, right? Nice and safe. Everybody's safe. But you, as knowing nuggets, know what I'm talking about. But you can see that some of these are worse than others, but some of them absolutely contain words that you cannot say on YouTube anymore. Not to mention that all we're able to look at here is the titles, but there may have been policy breaking thumbnails, as well as, of course, the content in the videos themselves. And is it no wonder that these videos are being deleted when the pressure is put on YouTube? So the change that happened in 2023 basically added these sorts of conditions to the self-harm category of their policies. And this is straight off of the Google/YouTube, terms and conditions page. I will link everything down below, by the way, if you want to read everything. So at YouTube, we take the health and well-being of our creators and viewers seriously. Awareness and understanding of mental health is important, and we support creators sharing their stories, such as posting content discussing their experience with depression and conditions or other mental health issues. However, we do not allow content on YouTube that promotes words that I cannot say or conditions that is intended to shock or disgust or that pose a considerable risk to viewers. So those words are very important, I think, when it comes to a lot of Amber's content, the shock or disgust factor. It's not necessarily that she's promoting her lifestyle, although sometimes she very much does, but she definitely aims for the shock and disgust factor. And we're going to go into the studied risks and potential harm to viewers of this particular end of the spectrum of this condition. I think when we're talking about eugenia, culturally, we are much more in tune with how that can harm youth or vulnerable people, but we don't necessarily talk as much about it at Amber's end of the spectrum of her condition. They go on to say basically what not to post. There's going to be a great deal of words in here that I cannot say without being age restricted, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? But I'll sum them up without saying, the content that we're talking about. So don't post any of the following content. Content promoting or glorifying, instructions on how to, content related to conditions that is targeted to minors, graphic images, visuals of these conditions, videos showing the lead up to certain things, content showing participation in or instructions for activities and conditions, activities, notes or letters, and content that features weight-based bullying in the context of these conditions. In some cases, we may restrict rather than remove this content if it meets one or more of the following criteria. Content that is meant to be educational, documentary, scientific, or artistic. This is where my content falls, and some of it has actually been age restricted. And that's why I was so excited when I got to get the physiology of Eugenia's condition to be stable, because I think that's educational. I'm not encouraging it, and I don't think it's harmful for people to see. Content that is of public interest. Graphic content that is sufficiently blurred. They're actually quite good about that. Dramatizations or scripted content. Detailed discussions of activities. Graphic descriptions of activities or conditions. And conditions recovery that include details which may be triggering. So this of course, they're not going to be removing these ones, but they will probably age restrict it. Or actually in one of my cases, which I find really redundant because it was a members only one, the first members only AI video that I released, I didn't have advertising on that, of course, because it's members only, but they still heavily restricted it. And so you have to go looking for it to know that it's there. So the consequences and what Amber's flouting of the policies is going to potentially result in for her, and potentially what we're seeing right now. So what happens if content violates this policy? If your content violates this policy, we will remove the content and send you an email to let you know. If we can't verify that a link you post is safe, we may remove the link. Note, violating URLs posted within the video itself or in the video's metadata may result in the video being removed. If this is your first time violating our community guidelines, you'll likely get a warning with no penalty to your channel. For the record, my nuggets, even though I have dealt with age restricting and things, I've never actually gotten to the official warning stage. You will have the option to take a policy training to allow the warning to expire after 90 days. The 90-day period starts from when the training is completed, not when the warning is issued. So that's very interesting to note. However, if the same policy is violated within that 90-day window, the warning may not expire. Your channel may be given a strike. If you violate a different policy after completing the training, you will get another warning. If you get 3 strikes within 90 days, your channel may be terminated. So these are really similar terms to what TikTok has, and at least I feel like YouTube is a little bit more open about when and what and why compared to TikTok, which is good. We may terminate your channel or account for repeated violations of the community guidelines or terms of service. We may also terminate your channel or account after a single case of severe abuse or when the channel is dedicated to a policy violation, which is interesting wording because these sorts of channels like Amber, like Eugenia, you could argue that they are dedicated to a particular policy violation. Just their being, no matter the mental health, unfortunately in these cases, could be considered a policy violation. We may prevent repeat offenders from taking policy trainings in the future. Finally, we may also limit your access to live streaming if you suggest that you'll live stream content that will violate our community guidelines. So interestingly, we've seen that they haven't limited Amber's ability to go live, but they have demonetized her. And if you notice, there's no mention of demonetizing in those paragraphs, which is what makes me think that this is highly risk adverse behavior on behalf of YouTube, and we're going to get into that. So this is all of 2023, and we can actually see that there were news articles released at that time documenting that this was going into effect. Notably, a CNN news article, YouTube rolls out new policies for conditions content. And I'll link this below as well, but just a little passage from it. They said, in addition to removing or age restricting some videos, YouTube plans to add panels pointing viewers to crisis resources under conditions related content in 9 countries, with plans to expand to more areas. And when a creator's video is removed for violating its conditions policy, Graham, a dude that works there, said YouTube will send them resources about how to create content that is less likely to harm viewers, which is the trading content we just read about. As with many social media policies, however, the challenge often isn't introducing it, but enforcing it. a challenge YouTube could face in discerning which videos are, for example, pro-recovery. YouTube said it will be rolling out enforcement of the policy globally in the coming weeks and plans to use both human and automated moderation to review videos and their content. And I can confirm they are doing that. Another thing that has been in place for years is a little checkbox when you're uploading a video that says, yes, it's for kids, or no, this content is not for kids. If it is for kids, it goes into a whole different category of, YouTube Kids and things like that. But my point being, all of this has been in place for years. This is not new. What is new is the ruthless enforcement of this. And that's what's interesting to me. Because this has been coming for so long, because the tools have been there for so long, the policies have been updated for years, YouTube literally gave their creators years to adjust. They could have been very unfair about this, but they've actually been quite lax on this particular topic. And if your sole income is this platform or any platform, but sole income on one platform, it's your responsibility to know policies. And if Amber, for example, had have been smart about her business strategy and about her income, she would have familiarized herself with this instead of time after time after time, even since 2023, using words that will get her age restricted, using words that she knows could get her channel taken down, but she has just not cared, or she's not bothered to educate herself on her literal job. Now, I said earlier that there are more factors going on in the world than just this lawsuit in America. So this lawsuit, this is a clip from Motley Rice, which is a leading litigation group in this particular lawsuit. And by the way, does Motley Rice not sound like an 80s tribute band? I think it every time I see it, and every time I have to say it, it's anyway. And you can see that YouTube is in fact involved quite heavily, quite equally in part in this lawsuit. And I just want to be really clear. Eugenia is mentioned by name in the lawsuit. Amber is not. But also, having said that, a lot of influencers are not mentioned by name. They're mentioning it by mechanism, by influence, by nature of videos. But there is more going on. So in the EU, there is a Digital Services Act and age verification in place at the moment. This was also years in the making, as things are. They move slowly. But as of July 2025, they launched an age verification app which allows users to prove they're over 18 without sharing personal information. Initially, it was rolled out in Denmark, France, Spain, Greece, and Italy, but multiple more countries are pushing for mandatory age verification, some of which are even proposing complete bans for under 15s. The UK also has an age-appropriate design code. It became enforceable in September 2021. However, it's only been recently that they've needed to have actual digital IDs. Australia was actually proposing something very, very similar, but I'm guessing kind of the way it's gone in the UK and the way the public has responded to it here, it has changed quite a bit. So there is going to be a ban on under 16-year-olds having social media accounts, full stop. And this is effective on the 10th of December, 2025, so it's coming up fast. And what they've done is put the onus on the actual companies to enforce this. So already Meta has sent out communications to all under 16-year-olds in Australia saying starting December 4th, so they're actually getting in early, that their accounts are going to begin being removed. So to start backing up data if you want it, because it's going. And these platforms include Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, X, YouTube, Kick, Reddit, Twitch. Twitch is a new addition, actually. So what I'm looking at is this trend of, we've got this massive protecting youth lawsuit in America. We've got the EU wanting to completely ban teens and already heavy restrictions on under 18s. We've got the UK with youth protection codes in place, and then we've got Australia putting bans on under 16s. So these are four really major regions of consumers of these platforms. And that's why I think we're starting to see the platforms engage in risk-adverse behavior where we may not have seen it before. So you've got like all of the major Western countries all putting this pressure on these companies, and they are acting under that pressure. Now, is that a good thing? I'm going to get into more when I do my videos on the actual companies' roles in the lawsuits, because I do have some thoughts about where does protection turn into authoritarian realm of things. I don't want to get too political. This is not a political channel, but I think behaviorally, you know, as parents, you should have rights. And when other entities step in, you start to lose those rights. So I won't be getting into that in this particular video, but look forward to that. That's going to be one epic Vera rant. So after all of this, 2023 policy change, age restriction tools available, other creators adjusting and pivoting in that time. But Amber, well, she just kept going because of course she did. So why Amber specifically? And yes, we know that there are some other people being targeted, but it is looking very specific, isn't it? It's not across the board. It's not even if you look at Amber's channel, I searched mukbang and there are all of these videos still available. So it's not a sweeping thing, which indicates to us it's not automatic. So what's happening to Amber that isn't happening to Hungry Fat Chick yet? So my theory of what's going on with this, because there's so much pressure, and please note my nuggets, this is speculation. I'm just putting two and two together. I could be completely wrong. It's starting to look a little obvious, I think. So if you think about the companies and what their goal is. So take YouTube, for example. Their goal is to make money. Right? I don't think that is a mystery to anybody. These companies are out there to make money. That's why they jam their videos full of ads. It's why they make sure that all of their content is safe for advertisers so that they're getting the most out of it. And so I think that we can operate on that as a base truth. Their motivation is to make money. To demonetize large channels or to demonetize many channels is going to be counterintuitive to their goal. But another thing that is counterintuitive to their goal is to look like they are willingly profiting off vulnerable people who are exploiting themselves to basically create harm to minors or to vulnerable people. I know all of these things are talking about minors, but I think it's important to talk about the vulnerable people as well. It's not just minors. So how do you navigate those two things that are operating in complete contrast to each other? You make it look like you're doing the right thing. So I think it would be easy for a very large company with who knows how many videos exist on YouTube, how many different accounts, all doing different things, because I think you can say the content that I'm doing about Amber is very different than the content that Amber does about Amber, right? So can you tar those two channels with the same brush when the message and the actions behind it are very different? So you can't just say, we're going to sweep for all of these words and we're going to sweep for all of these people. And, you know, that's not going to work to maintain the money coming in, right? But what they can't ignore is documented complaints. And a precedent has now been set with TikTok and Eugenia, because what had happened in that lawsuit was Discovery closed on April 2025. And then in May, Eugenia had her very, very public, very live health incident. And then the plaintiffs in this case, so these are the people doing the suing of the social media companies, said, this just happened. We want more Discovery documents on this. And of course, TikTok turned around and said, no, Discovery's closed. You can't have more. You had time. But the judge actually ruled in the favor of the plaintiffs and ordered TikTok to deliver more Discovery documents. So now there's this precedent that if something happens, especially if it's live, if an incident were to happen on YouTube's platform, for example, that might open them up to more Discovery, which is what they don't want to do. Say something happened to Amber on a live stream, then the plaintiffs go to YouTube. We want to see all of your communications about all of the complaints that were put in about this person. Were you doing your due diligence to protect your viewers? And then it comes back that all of these complaints have been put in about Amber and they did nothing. That doesn't look good. That looks really, really bad. So instead, what I think they're doing is when there are mass amounts of complaints, which we know that there is mass reporting on Amber's videos, and I would say foodies, because let's be honest, they're not very liked individuals, then YouTube can't ignore it. It's like the hand is now forced to act. So my theory is they're waiting for that catalyst to happen and then they act. And then what's happened is the reporting's come in, they've looked at the channel and they've gone, yeah, no, we can't be seen to make money off this. This is not good. So they demonetize. And this is why I think maybe Hungry Fat Chick hasn't been hit yet, because generally speaking, people like her more. They just do. She's a more likable individual than the likes of Amber or Foodie. And I actually went and checked, Eugenia's videos haven't been taken down yet either. So it's very interesting what's going on in this space. And I do think that a lot of this reporting is coming from a mean-natured place, but there is also some validity to it, and I'll get into that a little bit on in the video. So in this lawsuit, it was actually discovered by the plaintiffs that YouTube was aware about their algorithmic harm to minors. The lawsuit is quite clever actually to use very vague wording. It doesn't specifically call out which end of the spectrum of this condition we're speaking about, but instead they focus on the mechanism of harm, which essentially applies to both ends of the spectrum, right? What was discovered was the algorithm itself actually creates a harmful feedback loop. So once you watch a few of a certain kind of video, your feed becomes more concentrated with high volume of content that repeats the same message. And you've probably noticed that in your own feed. YouTube understood that social comparison and body image videos, when viewed in repetition and volume, can skew teen perceptions of norms and lead to harmful behaviors. The algorithm itself was proven to tune itself to keep children's eyes on YouTube without regard to what it was being shown, creating an echo chamber of escalating severity. Then YouTube created something called Project Vibe. It's basically kind of YouTube's own admission to this. Project Vibe stands for Volume Impacts Wellbeing. It was YouTube's initiative to address harms caused by algorithmic clustering. It creates a classifier to identify content recognized as harming teen well-being when viewed at high repetition volumes. And then it applied a classifier to disaggregate harmful algorithmic recommendations. It actually even said Dr. Jessica DeVento-Zuban, I think I butchered that, formerly YouTube's global head of mental health, hypothesized that exposure without Vibe would increase risk. But doing A/B testing on this is likely unethical, as we wouldn't expose someone to risk increasing content if that's our hypothesis. So basically what that's saying, a YouTube executive saying it would be unethical to test whether their platform without protections harmed kids because they already believed it did. So how this framework applies to Amber, the harm mechanism that YouTube identified, the repetitive content creating echo chambers, body comparison or social comparison content, absolutely, high volume consumption skewing perception, and content that seems harmless individually but harmful in high volume. And Amber's content actually hits all of these triggers. So conditions as entertainment, a yo-yo diet cycle right on display, weight fluctuations shown repeatedly, diet culture messaging, and how do I say this so that it's YouTube safe? Consuming food in a gotta keep this YouTube safe, high volume nature. I think we got there. I don't know if this gets taken down and then re-uploaded, you know that was naughty. And even though the writing was on the wall that this was coming, since 2023, or if you were really paying attention, since 2020, when all of these laws around the world started to be raised and put into place, she could have altered her content at that time to fit where the world was going. But instead, she wanted to stay ignorant. I don't believe she ever researched her own business, her own platform, and what was okay. She just assumed that what she had been doing would always be okay to keep doing. And the reality is, this is her sole income, right? Like, yeah, she had merch, although even that's been taken down on YouTube now too, so she doesn't have that anymore. If YouTube is your only source of income, you need to make it your business to know those policies. And take this as advice for any creators out there. Know your platform's policies. Ignorance is just not an excuse when your livelihood depends on it. And you set up contingencies, set up fallback plans just in case, because these things do change. And now I will admit too that I'm in a little bit of a fortunate situation with my channel because I've come in after all of these things had changed. So I just needed to dial into them and I was ready to go. But the reality is that Amber has years, over a decade worth of videos that she would have needed to go back through. But when it's your livelihood, unfortunately, that's just part of your job, that you need to then make sure that all of your videos still meet the current policies. Okay, so I got to thinking, what realistically is the harm that Amber can bring to the table? Because, for example, when we look at somebody like Eugenia, I think it's really clear. I think we've had a lot of education for many decades on why we don't want to look like that. Also, towards Eugenia's end of the spectrum is probably more considered the cultural average of beauty, right? Compared to Amber's end. I'm not saying that Eugenia is the ideal. Please do not take that from what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if we're looking at a spectrum, usually the definition of beauty is closer to Eugenia's end than to Amber's end. And I do think that there is quite the double standard around these two things, even though essentially we're talking about the same mental health issue. There has been some research around vulnerable persons consuming conditioned content of Amber's variety, so like mukbangs and things like that, showing that it is harmful. Now, there hasn't been as much research in this area as there has been on the other end of the spectrum, but here's a few little interesting things that I found. So parents defended government plans to regulate mukbangs after witnessing their children challenging themselves to eat as much, I can't say these words, to consume, like mukbangers, with health experts comparing glorifying this kind of activity to another kind of excessive consuming of alcohol and promoting the idea that doing this was something to be proud of. And when you think about mukbang videos, that's absolutely what they do. They're absolutely promoting, look at how much, look at how good, look at how much fun I'm having. And it does have that vibe. Another one, there was a study of 264 adults who watched mukbangs and also pro-conditioned content of this variety. There was actually an association with greater problematic food tendencies while viewing these sorts of videos. Another one, among Korean adolescents who watched mukbangs frequently, 29.1% reported increased consumption of home-delivered and convenience store food, and 7.7% developed inappropriate eating habits. And just one more, because why the cluck not? Association found between watching mukbang and generalized anxiety disorder among Korean adolescents with impulsive behaviors, including eating quickly or in mukbang quantities, imitating foods seen in programs, eating snacks instead of regular meals, and consuming stimulating foods. So in short, can Amber cause problems to youths and to vulnerable persons? Yeah, she can. She absolutely can. So are these people right to be reporting her? I will leave that up to you. What do you think, my nuggets? So the actual harm is equal when you consider the extremes of Eugenia and Amber. It's just kind of a different mechanism. Where Eugenia's content tends to teach the aesthetic and the behaviors and like the denial of the condition it being acceptable, or what Amber's content teaches is the condition as entertainment, as the yo-yo dieting cycle as normal. It teaches poor, very, very poor nutrition knowledge. Normalizing food as purely emotional and not fuel promotes the mindset of, oh, I'll start tomorrow, or I'll start on Monday, or I'll start on the 1st of the month, or I'll start next year, and the excess is not only acceptable, but it's funny. And I want to say millennial, but probably anybody, right, who's come from a parent who has put so much focus on diet culture, how that can get into your psyche, and the kind of harm that can actually bring. And for years, for decades, it gets into your mind in very insidious ways. And unfortunately, this kind of content can do the same for a growing mind or a vulnerable mind, especially when viewed in large volume. Another part of the problem that I thought about that I think is probably the most insidious, because I don't think that anybody is necessarily using Amber as a role model unless they're looking to get into girl world on that side of things. But the worst part, I think, is it almost creates a sliding scale of acceptable, right? So without these kind of extreme examples, without viewing this kind of content, you might feel like, oh, I just ate a whole pizza and that feels really excessive, and now I don't feel super good about what I did, or fast food 3 times a week seems so much, or the large portions feel uncomfortable. But when Amber enters the chat, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not as bad. I'm not eating 10,000 calories. Or, oh, I only had 1 pizza last night, not 3. I'm only eating half what she does. I'm nowhere near as bad as that. So then all of a sudden you're creating this permission base, a psychological mechanism to yourself to say, well, I'm not that bad, so I'm okay. It could be worse. I could be her, and that line of thinking is really dangerous, because you've moved all of a sudden what is normal or what is unacceptable into way down the track. And when you put that onto a culture, and I'm going to say America, I'm also going to say Australia, we are not better, and probably numerous other Western countries, when you layer that on that kind of culture that is already experiencing junk food addiction, that is already experiencing sugar and salt overload to the point where your palate no longer thinks that normal food tastes good, when you've got portion distortion, things become supersized instead of normal, normalized excess consumption, nutritional illiteracy, and just other economic factors, people thinking that junk food is cheaper than healthy food, which, by the way, small Vera rant, health food is expensive. Healthy food is not. Just prepare it yourself. Learn to cook. It's great. Okay, so Amber's content therefore provides this dangerous permission structure where it can completely redefine what we see as the top end of normal suddenly getting stretched way out of proportion. And one of the studies that we have already looked at actually found that adolescents who watched frequently this kind of content or were influenced by watching were more likely to consume fast food, late night snacks, and sugary beverages, and were more likely to attempt weight loss and use inappropriate weight loss methods. And so why this matters, the extreme creates the permission for the moderately harmful. In cultures already normalized to excess, this content doesn't shock people into recognizing it's wrong. It actually does the opposite. Instead, it provides a new, more extreme anchor point that makes their own harmful behaviors seem acceptable by comparison. When you look past, the drama and the tea and the lolcow of it all, it is actually for somebody who is not solidified within themselves, who is not confident, who potentially is still growing as an individual, it can be impactful to that person. So, my nuggets. This, if Amber and others in the space that are affected too was open to the idea, I think this could be the best thing that has ever happened to her. I really do. There's going to be, I think, a range of options that they could take from here, and they could double down and start doing eccentric interest. For my new nuggets, I'm saying eccentric, but it's eccentric because I'm a mother clocker and that's what I do. Certain predilection kind of territory. They could start doing things like that, which Hungry Fat Chick absolutely is open about doing on the side. She does do that kind of content, and that's one way to go. The other way to go would be to take this situation and take the need, the necessity to make a new kind of income and start to rebuild themselves as an actual functional part of society. What they could be doing is getting an actual job, becoming actually useful, which will lead to the necessity to actually lose some weight in a healthy and sustainable way, because they're going to need some sort of stamina to do the jobs, whatever jobs they wind up getting. Even if it's just a call center job, you need to be able to talk for a long time. And if you don't have the fitness for that, that can be challenging. To be able to witness themselves, to grow, to take on new challenges, to do things like everybody else does in society that they felt they couldn't do for all of these years, that could be really powerful. I would love to see Amber go that route. I think that would be the most beneficial thing for her. And it's very interesting because we've been hearing nothing for like a year of, I really need to get off YouTube. I think I need a break. What else am I going to do? All this. And then she gets on a live stream last night and says, I love YouTube. I absolutely love it. I think it's almost like she thinks if she sucks up to it, they're going to put her back. But this might be the kick in the cloaca that she needs. It really might be. If I were her, and I know that this would be very, very difficult, but if I were her, I would be embracing this with open arms. I'd be taking the 90 days and just turning the clock around. Do everything different. Take it as the opportunity, because now she hasn't got a fallback. She can't fall back, so she needs to fall forward and just watch herself achieve. And is it going to hurt financially? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is it going to be scary? Absolutely. Is it going to force a complete life restructure? Yes. And that is perfect. Because Amber has been slowly unaliving herself. Like, let's be honest about it. She's been slowly unaliving herself in front of us on camera for years and making money while doing it, and with thousands of people watching and enabling it. And this could actually be, if she kept her mind open to it, the intervention that she can't ignore, that she can't manipulate, and that she can't perform her way out of. Although she's trying her best with the cameo, for sure, it could be life-changing. It could be the moment that she looks back on in 20 years and goes, wow, I am so glad that happened to me, because I was on a path of self-destruction that had no way out. But with this opportunity on the table, and it is an opportunity, will she take it? I don't know. Like I say, I always need to leave room for growth. I always want to hope for the best in people, even if they don't necessarily deserve it. I think if we're looking at her historically, she will probably just somehow maintain leech status for 3 months and then get it back if it comes back, and continue on. But I don't want to say that that's definitely what's going to happen, because that's so clucking bleak. I can't. So what happens next? Look, if this was a normal set of circumstances without all of the, the lawsuits and the age restrictions and everything that's going on, I might say she can just do the training that they want her to do, wait it out, and then she would just go back to normal. Can that happen though? Because we've seen Eugenia in a weird sort of holding pattern. Now that is TikTok, so it is a different company, which means different lawyers and different ways of dealing with things. But it might be that YouTube is just taking a stance at this point that they don't want that kind of content monetized on their platform anymore, which is well within their right to do, because it is a private company, they get to pick. But if that's the case, they might not let her back. They might not want to risk it at this point. And these lawsuits and these restrictions are so slow moving that it's like, well, how long will it drag out? How long is their hand going to be held to the fire in a way that they feel like they need to be risk avoidant? I don't know. What I do know is I'll be breaking down each platform's role in the upcoming videos, which I think is very enlightening as to what they knew and what they've been ignoring for years, for a very long time, some of them, because don't forget, Facebook is involved in this too. And it's revealing, to say the least. But for now, this is what's happening with Amber and why it's happening. So hopefully that will clear up any misinformation that's going around. I think all of this is really clear when you look at the facts. It just, it must feel pretty bad at the moment to be in Amber's shoes. Amber's content, without a doubt, is policy violating. There's no other way to look at it. She has been so arrogant with the words that she uses and the types of videos that she makes that she's just displayed so much ignorance when it comes to the platform that she's on, especially when you consider that she's had 2 years to adjust to this and she just chose not to. And now this enforcement is happening and it's like, oh, I'm sad and I'm shocked. And for Amber, this is devastating to her income. I'm not at all celebrating that. What I am celebrating is the new opportunity that she has been presented that, quite frankly, can't be ignored. I think we can feel some empathy for people losing income, because I think for people who have struggled financially in their life, they wouldn't necessarily wish that on anyone. But I think in this case, we can also at the same time acknowledge that that income source is harmful for her. Not for everyone, but the way that she was using it, absolutely. It enabled her to stay in her victimhood and her condition. Tell me what you think about this, my nuggets. I'm genuinely interested to hear, because this is potentially going to break girl world as we know it. I think it's going to be quite revolutionary in the space, and I am here to report on it. I am loving digging through all of this legal stuff and policies, and I've discovered this passion in my life that I didn't know was there, and now I love it. And I never want to stop. So I'll be here making them if you're here watching them. But if you are here still listening, thank you so much. This was a lengthy video and I appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you so much to all of my cluckers who support on Patreon and YouTube membership. I appreciate you so, so much. And there is more content coming very shortly. In fact, I think at this point, there's always going to be more content coming very shortly, because I really enjoy doing that kind of content that I don't have to watch what I say and I can just cover the stuff that I actually want to be covering. And if you want to support the channel, or if you would like to watch the members only content, you can head on over to my Patreon or YouTube memberships. And there's also on Patreon single purchase options for the videos as well. So that way you don't need to commit to a subscription, even though I think you can cancel them all at any time anyway. But that is all the clocks I have left to give. Stay golden, my little nuggets, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey! Hey! I'm gonna go watch another video. Let's go!